I have seen enough years behind this bench to understand that lies often come wrapped in velvet. They don't arrive as desperate, trembling confessions. They arrive as polished monologues, delivered with the practiced ease of someone who has never been told no. That was exactly what walked into my courtroom that Tuesday morning. The case was called at 10 a.m. State versus Chloe Vance. The allegations were fraud, falsification of documents, and criminal mischief. On paper, it was a dry, administrative mess. Paper is good at hiding the human cost. It doesn't capture the shaking hands of a landlord whose business was decimated by a fabricated claim, nor does it capture the sheer, chilling lack of empathy radiating from a 2-3-year-old woman sitting in the defendant's chair. Chloe Vance didn't look like a fraudster. She looked like she had just stepped off a brochure for the upper class. She wore a silk blouse that cost more than a week's wages for the person she was accused of ruining. She didn't sit tentatively. She claimed the space. She crossed her legs, checked her reflection in the dark screen of her phone, and sighed a loud, audible sound that signaled to everyone in the room that her time was being wasted. I have learned that arrogance is rarely just a personality trait. In a courtroom, it is a tactic. It is a shield. If you act like you are the most important person in the room, eventually, people stop asking you the hard questions. They start accommodating you. That was the game Chloe Vance was playing. Across from her sat Mr. Henderson, a man who looked like he had been hollowed out by the stress of the last 6 months. He didn't have a high-priced lawyer. He had a folder of printed emails and a worn-out notebook. He didn't have the posture of power, just the desperate, heavy energy of a man looking for a truth that had been buried under money. I looked at Chloe. She didn't look at me. She was busy adjusting her bracelet. So I did what I always do when the ego in the room starts to choke the oxygen. I made her acknowledge reality. "Put the phone away," I said. She looked up, not with shame, but with that faint, flickering annoyance of someone who had been inconvenienced by a minor irritation. She slipped it into her designer bag, but the air in the room remained charged with her entitlement. She thought she was here to tell a story. She didn't know yet that she was here to be dismantled. I don't trust paper. I trust the truth. And truth, unlike paperwork, has a pulse. Chloe Vance had presented a mountain of documents, invoices, service contracts, and notarized letters, all designed to paint Mr. Henderson as a negligent landlord who had failed to maintain the property, leading to her injuries. It was a masterpiece of corporate fiction. "Mr. Henderson," I said, turning my attention away from the defendant's smug expression, "you've heard Miss Vance describe your property as a death trap. She claims she tripped over a loose floorboard in the lobby on October 14th. Do you have a floorboard in your lobby?" Henderson shook his head, his voice strained. "No, Your Honor. The lobby was renovated 3 months before that date. There isn't a loose board in the entire building. I have the receipts, the contractor's sign-off, and the photos from the day before the alleged incident." Chloe Vance let out a sharp, dismissive laugh, a sound clearly intended for the court's ears to show how ridiculous she found this defense. "Oh, please," she interjected, leaning forward. "Everyone knows he's trying to save face. My attorney has the medical reports, the therapy bills, all proof of my pain and his negligence. I don't need to lie about tripping over a piece of wood. That was the mistake." She was too quick to defend the lie before it had even been fully challenged. She was performing the role of the victim, but she was overacting. When you are truly hurt, you don't need to sell the injury with attitude. The injury sells itself. I looked down at the documents her attorney had submitted. They were clean, too clean. No smudges, no inconsistencies, perfectly typed, perfectly dated. It looked like a file prepared for a movie set, not a real-world dispute. "Miss Vance," I said, cutting through her rehearsed indignation, "you say this happened on October 14th, a Tuesday. You also claim you were unable to work for 6 weeks following the accident. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. I was in physical therapy. I couldn't even walk to my car, let alone work." I glanced at the time-stamped photos on my desk, the ones Mr. Henderson had provided, not just of the floor, but of the lobby's security footage. I hadn't let the secret out yet. I wanted to see how far she would lean into the lie. "And during those 6 weeks," I continued, "you were completely housebound?" "Strictly," she said, her eyes flashing with a rehearsed confidence. "I was barely able to function." She was so sure. She was so convinced that her expensive look and her expensive lawyer had already bought her a win. She didn't realize that I don't care about the silk blouse or the designer bag. I care about the timeline. And the timeline, as I was about to show her, is the one thing no one can ever successfully manipulate. "Miss Vance," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. You just testified under oath that you were strictly housebound for 6 weeks following October 14th. You claimed you were in agonizing pain, unable to so much as walk to your vehicle. That is correct, she replied, tilting her chin up. Her attorney, a man whose expensive suit was beginning to look a little too tight around the collar, gave a short affirmative nod. I turned my attention to the monitor built into the bench. Mr. Henderson has submitted security footage from his building, not just from the lobby on October 14th, but from the exterior parking structure covering the 3 weeks subsequent to your alleged injury. For the first time since she walked into my courtroom, Chloe Vance's posture shifted. It wasn't a collapse, not yet, but the microscopic tightening of her shoulders told me everything. The velvet was starting to fray. Let's play the first video. I instructed the bailiff. The screen flared to life. It was time-stamped October 14th, 2:15 p.m., the exact hour she claimed in her meticulously typed documents to have tripped and broken her ankle. The camera angle provided a crystal-clear view of the newly renovated lobby. The floor was immaculate. A few seconds later, Chloe Vance walked through the double doors. She wasn't limping. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was walking briskly, wearing high-heeled boots, carrying a heavy gym bag over one shoulder. She crossed the lobby, bypassing the exact spot where she supposedly fell, and entered the elevator without breaking stride. I paused the video. The silence in the room was absolute. It is a specific kind of silence that only exists when a lie is dragged out into the harsh, fluorescent light of reality. Miss Vance, I said, looking over the rim of my glasses. I am looking at a woman in 4-inch heels, carrying what appears to be 20 pounds of gym equipment. Does this look like a woman who just shattered her ankle on a negligent landlord's loose floorboard? She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked at her attorney. Her lawyer stood up, his smooth demeanor replaced by a sudden frantic urgency. Your Honor, the timestamp on that video could easily be altered or manipulated. My client— Sit down, counselor, I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. I haven't asked you a question yet. I looked back at Chloe. The boredom was completely gone from her face now. In its place was the panicked realization that the courtroom was not a stage for her performance, but an anvil for the truth. She was beginning to realize that the expensive paper shield she brought with her was highly flammable. We aren't finished, I said, folding my hands. Let's watch the next clip. Your Honor, if I may, her attorney stepped forward again, nervously adjusting his cuffs. My client did suffer an injury. The video may merely show a brief moment of adrenaline, or perhaps a temporary reprieve from her chronic pain. Adrenaline. I let the word hang in the air, allowing the sheer absurdity of it to echo off the wood-paneled walls. Adrenaline, I repeated slowly. Counselor, I have seen people run on adrenaline. They sprint away from danger. They lift heavy objects off trapped civilians. They do not casually stroll into an elevator while adjusting their lip gloss. What your client is demonstrating on this screen is not a sudden burst of adrenaline. It is perjury. I turned my attention back to the monitor on my bench. But let us indulge this highly creative theory of a temporary reprieve, because Mr. Henderson did not just bring me lobby footage. He also brought me the public posts from Miss Vance's social media accounts that were curiously scrubbed clean yesterday evening, but not before they were properly archived, time-stamped, and submitted into evidence. Chloe's face drained of color. The expensive bronzer suddenly looked like paint on a ghost. Exhibit C, I instructed. Another image appeared on the monitors. It was a photograph of Miss Vance, radiant and glowing, wearing a designer swimsuit and holding a cocktail on the deck of a yacht. The caption, written in her own hand, read, "Living my best life, number weekend vibes." This photograph, I read directly from the submitted file, was posted on November 2nd, 2.5 weeks after the alleged incident in the lobby. During the exact window of time Miss Vance claimed, under oath, that she was undergoing intensive, agonizing physical therapy and could not leave her residence. Unless this luxury yacht doubles as a medical rehabilitation center, we have a significant discrepancy in the narrative. Chloe looked down at her lap, her perfectly crossed ankles uncrossed. The invisible shield of wealth and entitlement that she had carried into the room was fracturing into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. Everyone in the room could see it. She looked up, her voice suddenly small, stripped of all its previous haughtiness. I just wanted to get away for a few days to heal. The salt air is supposed to be good for— Stop, I commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a lock snapping shut. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending a luxury yacht vacation was a prescribed medical necessity. You sued this man for $15,000 in lost wages, medical trauma, and emotional distress. You sat in my courtroom today and swore, under penalty of perjury, that you were entirely incapacitated. You are not a victim, Miss Vance. You are an opportunist. I watched her attorney quietly close his manila folder and step back. He knew it was over. Lawyers who deal in fabricated realities know exactly the sound a house of cards makes when it finally hits the table. When a lie is finally broken in open court, the person who told it usually chooses one of two paths. They either weep and beg for the court's mercy, or they try to minimize the damage. Chloe Vance, true to her insulated upbringing, chose the latter. She crossed her arms, her expensive diamond bracelets clinking against each other in the heavy silence of the room. Fine, she snapped. The polished, victimized veneer was completely gone, replaced by the petulant tone of a child denied a toy. If it's such a massive issue, I'll just drop the lawsuit. I don't need his money anyway. My father can just write him a check for whatever time he wasted. Can we go now? I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the heavy mahogany of the bench. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of that statement seemed to suck the remaining oxygen right out of the room. Miss Vance, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, you do not get to file a fraudulent lawsuit, commit perjury in my courtroom, attempt to extort an innocent man, and then just drop it the moment you are caught. The justice system is not a luxury country club where you can simply cancel your reservation when the service doesn't suit your mood. I looked over at Mr. Henderson. His hands were resting on his worn notebook, shaking slightly not from fear, but from the overwhelming, exhausting relief of finally being seen. Let us look at the reality of what you call a waste of time, I told her, directing my gaze back to the defendant's table like a laser. Mr. Henderson is an independent business owner. Because of your completely fabricated medical claim, his property insurance premiums skyrocketed. He had to drain his personal savings money intended for his daughter's college tuition just to cover the initial legal consultations before he was forced to represent himself today. He has lived with the stress of financial ruin for 6 months because a wealthy young woman decided she wanted a quick payout to fund her social calendar. Chloe rolled her eyes, a reflexive, highly defensive gesture. I already said my dad can cover his expenses, she muttered under her breath, looking away. It's really not that deep. That is the absolute tragedy of unearned privilege. It builds a fortress of wealth so thick that the people living inside it lose all concept of human consequence. They are raised to believe that every sin, every mistake, and every cruelty has a simple price tag attached to it. They believe that as long as they can afford the fine, they are exempt from the morality of the situation. Your father is not on trial here today, I said sharply, ensuring every word landed with impact. You are. And you are about to find out that there is a severe penalty for trying to use the law as your personal ATM. Her attorney put a desperate hand on her arm, whispering frantically, trying to stop his client from digging the hole any deeper. But entitlement is a hard habit to break. She shook him off, glaring up at the bench. She still firmly believed her last name could protect her. She was profoundly mistaken. Miss Vance, I said, the silence in the room now so heavy you could feel it in your lungs. You came into this courtroom today believing that the law is a game and that your family's bank account gave you extra pieces on the board. You thought that if you were caught, you could simply buy your way out of the consequence. You are about to learn that in this room, we all play by the exact same rules. I looked down at the docket, then back at her. First, your lawsuit against Mr. Henderson is dismissed with prejudice. You will never bring these fraudulent claims against him or his business ever again. Chloe gave a stiff, jerky nod, her eyes already darting toward the heavy wooden doors at the back of the room. She thought that was the end of it. She thought she was going home to her insulated life. But we are far from done, I continued, ensuring her eyes snapped back to the bench. Mr. Henderson has filed a countersuit for malicious prosecution and the severe financial damages resulting from your fabricated claims. I am finding entirely in his favor. For the insurance premium spikes, the legal consultation fees, and the intentional infliction of financial distress, I am ordering you to pay Mr. Henderson the maximum allowable amount in this court, $10,000. Fine, she snapped, though her voice had noticeably thinned out. My dad will write the check this afternoon. No, he will not, I replied instantly, cutting off her exit strategy. I am ordering that this restitution be paid directly from your personal accounts, Miss Vance. If your father attempts to wire the funds, or if his corporate office issues a check on your behalf, I will hold you in contempt of court. You committed this fraud on your own, and you will feel the financial weight of it pass through your own hands." Her attorney shifted uncomfortably, staring down at his polished shoes. He knew what was coming next, even if she didn't. "Furthermore," I said, adjusting my glasses and looking at her over the rims, "because you deliberately lied under oath, I am forwarding this entire transcript, along with the security footage and your archived social media posts, directly to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation to pursue felony perjury charges." The last remaining trace of arrogance evaporated from Chloe's face. The realization finally hit her like a physical blow. The district attorney's office did not care about her father's checkbook. A criminal charge could not be erased with a casual apology. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom didn't slam, but they opened with enough forceful momentum that every head in the gallery turned. A man stepped through, flanked by a bewildered-looking bailiff who had clearly been told to stand aside. He was in his late 50s, wearing a bespoke navy suit that spoke of generational wealth, but his face carried the grim, hard lines of a man who had just witnessed a profound disappointment. "Dad?" Chloe's voice cracked. It was the first time she sounded her actual age. Charles Vance did not look at his daughter. He walked straight down the center aisle, stopped just behind the wooden gate that separated the gallery from the bench, and looked directly at me. He didn't radiate the aggressive, demanding energy of a rich man looking to bully a judge. He radiated the exhaustion of a parent who had run out of excuses for his child. "Your Honor," he said, his voice deep and remarkably steady, "I am Charles Vance. I have been watching the proceedings from the overflow monitor in the hallway." I studied him for a moment. "Mr. Vance, your daughter has repeatedly invoked your name and your bank account as a substitute for her own accountability. You are not a party to this suit. But given the circumstances, I will allow you to speak." Chloe was out of her chair, her manicured hands gripping the edge of the defense table. "Dad, tell them you'll handle it. He's just a landlord. We can settle this right now." "Chloe, sit down and be quiet," he snapped. The sharpness of his tone cut through her panic instantly. She sank back into the chair, stunned into silence. He turned back to the bench. "Your Honor, I apologize to this court, and I apologize to Mr. Henderson. I have spent my life building a company, and in the process, I clearly failed to build my daughter's character. She has always believed that my money was her safety net. As of this morning, that net is gone." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a stack of plastic 3 platinum credit cards, and placed them deliberately on the wooden railing. "Her trust fund access is frozen. Her accounts are locked. If this court has ordered her to pay $10,000 to Mr. Henderson, she will have to find a job and earn every single penny of it herself. I will not pay a dime of this judgment, nor will I provide legal counsel for any perjury charges the district attorney chooses to file." The courtroom was dead silent. Chloe was no longer just pale. She looked as if the floor had opened up beneath her. For the first time in her 23 years, the word no was not a negotiation. It was an absolute, terrifying reality. I nodded slowly, respecting the incredibly difficult choice this man had just made in open court. "Mr. Vance," I said softly, "it is a rare and painful thing for a parent to watch their child fall. But sometimes, hitting the concrete is the only way they ever learn how to stand up on their own." When Charles Vance stepped back from the railing, he didn't look at his daughter again. He turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving the heavy oak doors to close softly behind him. In that single echoing thud, Chloe Vance's entire universe was rewritten. The young woman who had strutted into my courtroom less than an hour ago, armed with a designer handbag and a manufactured air of superiority, was gone. In her place sat a terrified 23-year-old adult, facing the absolute certainty of her own actions. She looked at her attorney, but he was already snapping his briefcase shut. He was a man paid handsomely to defend the wealthy, not to babysit the newly broke. I turned my attention back to the plaintiff's table. Mr. Henderson was quietly wiping a stray tear from his eye. The heavy burden of unjust litigation, the sleepless nights, the paralyzing fear of losing the business he had built with his own 2 hands, it was all finally lifting from his shoulders. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice softening just enough to convey the profound respect he was owed, "you have your judgment, you have your good name back, and you have the apology of a father who recognizes the harm his child has caused. You are dismissed." He nodded, gathering his simple, worn notebook, and walked out with his head held high. That is what dignity looks like. It does not need silk blouses, expensive lawyers, or a staged performance to announce itself. Months later, my clerk informed me of the conclusion to Chloe Vance's story. The district attorney did, in fact, pursue the perjury charge. Without her father's wealth to hire a team of legal fixers to make the problem disappear, she was forced to face the music. She accepted a plea deal, 3 years of strict probation and 500 hours of community service. To pay off the $10,000 judgment she owed Mr. Henderson, she had to take a minimum wage job working retail at a local shopping center. She spent her days folding clothes, stocking shelves, and dealing with demanding customers, experiencing, perhaps for the first time in her life, the very reality of the working class she had so casually tried to exploit. People often ask me if courtrooms are just theatrical stages where the rich inevitably crush the poor. I tell them no. A courtroom, when run correctly, is a crucible. It is the one room in civil society where manufactured narratives are subjected to the intense, unforgiving heat of facts, evidence, and sworn testimony. Chloe Vance walked in believing her family name was an impenetrable shield. She thought her money was a weapon that could alter reality. She forgot that true justice does not read bank statements, and it does not bow to entitlement. Accountability is the great equalizer. When the velvet is stripped away, and when bought power finally fails, character is the only thing you have left to stand on. Case dismissed.